Thank you for joining me today. In this PowerPoint, we'll be looking at classroom strategies for children with neurodevelopmental characteristics. By that, I mean characteristics of autism spectrum disorder, ASD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. It's recommended that you've looked at the PowerPoint presentations on understanding ASD and understanding ADHD to gain the necessary background information to this training. But in this session, we will look at how we can make classrooms inclusive for all learners, including those with ASD or ADHD characteristics. However, you may also find that many of these strategies will help the whole class to improve engagement and readiness to learn. There are some general strategies and approaches that you can use with your class that will help learners with ASD and ADHD characteristics. To start with, it's important to have a lot of organisation and structure. So making sure that you have a daily classroom routine, for example, the same time for stories and desk work every day, and using things like lists, timetables, timescales, and regular reminders. It's also important to have clear rules and expectations. You can display the rules clearly on the wall to remind children, and make sure that the rules are unambiguous and written positively. For example, instead of saying no shouting out, say we put our hands up when we want to speak. You can also display the lessons on the day's lessons on the wall of the board, and be consistent, firm, fair, patient, and give constant feedback and rewards for positive behaviour. This links on to positivity. So you want to say what behaviours you want to see rather than what you don't want to see, and appreciate and accept that the child cannot help themselves. The behaviour is not prompted by naughtiness. Have positive expectations, minimise stress, and make learning fun. Use visible rewards and motivations rather than punitive measures, and be kind. It's also important to make sure that the child actually understands and registers the messages when you're providing a whole class instruction. To improve this, you can pause to create suspense and ask the child to repeat back what they've been asked to do. It's also useful to minimise instructions, so keep instructions simple and concrete. Let's look at the environment. We need to think about how the environment impacts on a child's readiness to learn. In a classroom, there will be many factors that can reduce the child's readiness to learn. Some examples include people moving about and talking, things going on outside the window, bright and busy displays on the walls, peers to talk to, noise from bells, for example, and having distractions such as their belongings and materials on the desk, just to name a few. For some children, this can all be too much, and a child may feel overwhelmed or overloaded, trying to process all of this sensory input whilst trying to focus on listening to the teacher or completing a task. Simple changes you can make to the environment could be seating a distractible child in a quieter area of the class, at the front of the class, or near the board so instructions can be clearer. Also consider seating the child in an area with less visual stimulation. For example, away from bright colourful displays that could be distracting, and avoid having too many things out on the desk, and avoid seating a child next to the windows. For children who can become overloaded by sensory information, a quiet corner may be helpful to cope with all of the stimulation and give them time to regulate their sensory systems. Some ideas for a calming corner may be a pop-up tent with some soft cushions and blankets inside, some headphones with calming music, and some reading books, puzzles, or fidget toys. Consider having one calm wall. Allow time out if required to move, de-stress, and allow for breathing and relaxation strategies to be implemented. So how do we get the best out of our students? Put simply, we need them to be paying attention to make sure that they can learn. But children are not always in the just right state of alertness, like the child in the middle picture, when they arrive at school, or even as time passes throughout the day. You may notice children who look like the child in the picture on the left, disengaged and lacking a little energy and enthusiasm. Or You might notice children who are constantly talking to one another, moving about and finding other things to do, more like the children in the picture on the right, where they are too alert and too busy to focus on doing a task. Let's look at how we can increase alertness levels for some children while maintaining or managing the alertness of others. Sensory circuits are a great activity that can be useful to help children be at optimal level of alertness and readiness to learn. A sensory circuit basically involves completing certain activities in sequence, alerting, organising and calming, which will help regulate the child's sensory systems, and as a result they will be more alert and focused, ready to learn. Sensory circuits is a good activity to do as a whole class at the start of the day to wake up sleepy children and ensure that busy children have had a chance to expel excess energy. It's important to ensure that the circuit begins with alerting activities, followed by organising activities and finishes with calming activities. It's also important to be consistent and persevere with the circuit by doing it daily to be able to monitor progress and effectiveness. Alerting activities wake up the sensory system and include activities such as burpees, bouncing, running, the daily mile and star jumps, as they all give the child a chance to move and burn off energy that makes them otherwise fidgety. Organising activities help a child to focus and include whole body movements that involve control and coordination. Activities include throwing beanbags into hoops, throwing and catching balloons or balls, balancing on one leg, walking along a straight line, hopscotch and skipping. Calming activities help bring down a child's level of arousal to help reduce the chance of overexcitement or hyperactivity. Because of the proprioceptive input, children benefit from a lasting feeling of calm. Deep pressure and slow rhythmical movements make up many of the calming activities. Examples include deep pressure touch through the shoulders while seated or while lying on a mat with a therapy ball, and using weighted lap pads or shoulder pads. Other examples include slow and controlled pulling of therabands, squeezing Play-Doh, slime or resistive putty, listening to calming music, practicing children's yoga, mindful activities, and blowing bubbles. As we know, some children with ASD characteristics struggle with transitions and coping with change, which can lead to distress. It's therefore important to consider how we can help an anxious child reduce anxiety and manage their emotions throughout the school day. We need to increase predictability and prepare a child for what's going to happen. One way of doing this is using visual resources, for example timetables, to help a child know what to expect. Also, some children will struggle to work out how they're feeling and may not be able to tell us what is wrong. It can be useful to have a daily check-in in the morning with the child to help them know what will happen throughout the day and talk through how they're feeling generally. It's useful to have another check-in at the end of the day to talk through what might have been difficult during the day or what they might be worried about, and have close communication with the child's parents or caregivers so that you can identify and reduce potential triggers. Help a child develop their toolbox of coping strategies to use to help them calm and regulate when they're overwhelmed or upset. Consider a quiet corner or area for the child to take themselves away to access when required, and allow de-stress, tactile or fiddle toys. Use social stories to talk through new activities step by step. For example, for a school trip, it will involve steps such as getting the bus, going to the museum, having lunch, going to the park, getting back on the bus and going home. Have patience and understanding and think how you can make small adjustments accordingly. For example, if you know a child has sensory sensitivities, be flexible with the uniform policy, ensure there's enough time for eating and changing, and support smooth transitions between lessons by allowing them to leave the class a few minutes sooner or later than the rest of the class. Work on self-esteem, for example, daily compliments about a child's skills, kindness or behaviour. When taking turns in a group, use a timer and set limits to reduce conflict. Some useful strategies to help capture a child's attention include working away from distractions, use motivating tasks to break up less preferred tasks. For example, handwriting, then free choice or play outside. Offer choices and help the child organise their day. For example, maths or literacy rather than do you want to do maths? Make learning fun. All children hate being bored. Count down to transitions, for example, in 10, 5 minutes, etc. And use large type on handouts. Some strategies to help keep a child on task include considering chunking work into shorter bursts broken up with breaks. For example, 10 minutes of focused work, then a short movement break rather than expecting a child to sit for 30 minutes to complete a task. Use visual sound timers to let a child know how long they have to work on a task for. Enable children to have water bottles on their tables. Consider getting children to drink a thick liquid such as a smoothie or milkshake through a very thin straw to improve concentration. Cold temperatures are more alerting. Monitor progress regularly throughout the lesson. Allow the child to doodle, make notes and mind maps when listening. Some ideas to help manage hyperactivity in business include fidget aids, such as having a pot of fidget aids on class tables so that a child can keep their hands busy while listening. Tying a piece of TheraBand around the legs of a chair so that a child can keep their feet busy and sit in the chair for longer. Allow a child to chew on water bottles or chewy pencil toppers. Consider a move and sit cushion for a child who squirms around in their seat. And for children who have low tone, who have quite a floppy appearance, make sure that they're sat in a good position at their desks with their feet flat on the floor and ensuring that their chair is tucked in close to the table with their back supported by the chair. If they've got a big gap behind them, consider placing a cushion behind them and a small step under their feet if their feet aren't resting flat on the floor to get them into this functional position. Encourage a child to get involved in jobs around the class that involves heavy work, like stacking the chairs, setting out the benches, carrying the box of musical instruments or PE equipment, and running errands. And incorporate lots of movement breaks and use physical activity to keep the child alert and ready to learn. Some useful strategies to help the child manage impulsivity include adopting stop, think and do approaches, reminding the whole class to put their hand up if they want to talk, not one child. Encourage pupils to stop and think before talking. This will help a child with ADHD to learn to slow down before talking. You can do this by waiting 10 seconds before you accept answers from the class. You can also remind the whole class about the rules for interrupting. If one persists, talk to them on their own rather than in front of the whole class. You can also remind the whole class before they speak to give only one sentence at a time. To manage conflict at break and lunchtime with peers, consider reducing the amount of children that the child interacts with, for example, having 1 to 2 friends at a time to avoid potential conflicts. And in situations such as school trips or situations where you know the child is likely to be impulsive, then obviously a high level of supervision would be recommended. So, time for a question scenario. There's a child in my class who refuses to complete any of the tasks I set them. What strategies could I use to get them to engage more positively? Many children who avoid, oppose and defy demands placed on them cope and engage better when strategies to reduce demand avoidance are used. Let's find out what this might include on the next slide. Some children do not respond well to many of the general strategies we've suggested in the previous slides. For children who tend to avoid demands placed on them, some of these strategies might be helpful. It's important to prioritise and pick your battles. It's also important to reduce demands placed on a child, especially when they're anxious. It's helpful to think and be flexible and creative in how you ask a child to do something. Use choice and negotiation. For example, can you finish this task by the end of the day? Instead of asking them to do it right now. And ask them, would you rather do this activity or this activity first, rather than, can you do this? Use of indirect language, humour and games, for example, I'll race you, are all really good strategies. As well, indirect praise and affirmation help a child continue to display the desired behaviour. As we mentioned, it's important to balance tolerance demands, for example, reduce demands when anxiety is high. The second question. What discrete fidget aids would you recommend that won't disturb the rest of the class? There are a wide variety of fidget aids that children with busy hands can use while listening. There are things like stress balls and squishy or stretchy balls which a child could keep in their pocket or on a keyring. Other more available fidget aids include having strips of Velcro underneath a desk for a child to feel and having blue tack available for them to fiddle with. There are also some great chewy pencil toppers that a child can use, and chewing gum is also known to help a child to concentrate. The third question. What quick sensory or movement break activities can I ask a child to do that don't involve resources or equipment? Some quick and effective movement break activity ideas include the following. Going to the wall and doing 10 wall push-ups. So basically standing with the hands against the wall and slowly and calmly pushing towards the wall so their nose is almost touching and pushing back up so their face is away from the wall. Doing animal walks such as bear crawls. This is on your hands and feet and walking your way across from one side of the room to the other and back again. Pushing hands through your hands onto the seat of the chair to push the bottom and legs off the chair. So to do this, you literally sit on the chair, place your hands underneath your legs and push up through your arms so that your legs are off the chair, and you can hold this position for 10 to 20 seconds. And active games such as a game of beans where you get the child to and yourself to shout out different types of beans. So if it's broad bean, you complete a certain action, and similar for runner bean, baked bean, French bean, and any other beans you can think of. This is also a really lovely activity as it's great for listening skills and for paying attention as well. Thank you for listening to this presentation. For any more ideas and information, then please take a look at our website below.